If an empath has ever disappeared from your life without a fight, there's a high chance you didn't lose them suddenly. You slowly trained them to leave without even realizing it. If an empath has ever disappeared from your life, there's something you need to understand right away. They didn't leave suddenly. They didn't just wake up one day and stop caring. The truth is, they were slowly shutting down while still being there. Still replying to your messages, still listening to your problems, still showing up, just not the same way anymore. And by the time you noticed something felt different, the version of them you knew was already gone. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the exact stages of how that happens. Not in a dramatic way, not in a one big mistake kind of way, but in the small, almost invisible patterns that slowly turn deep emotional connection into quiet detachment. And here's the uncomfortable part. Most people don't even realize they're doing it. So if you've ever wondered why someone who once cared so deeply about you can suddenly feel so distant, or if you're the one who quietly pulled away without explaining anything, this might be the explanation you never had. Let's break it down. Stage 1. They gave you more than most people ever would. At the beginning, being around an empath feels different. They notice things no one else does, the shift in your tone, the pause before your reply, the I'm fine that clearly isn't fine. And without you asking, they lean in, they listen longer, they remember small details. They make you feel seen in a way that almost feels rare. For a while, it feels like you finally found someone who just gets you without effort. And here's the part most people don't realize. That level of attention, that emotional presence, it's not normal. It's not something they do for everyone. It's something they give selectively. But when you experience it consistently, your brain starts to treat it like a baseline. Like, this is just who they are. Like, they'll always be this available. And that's exactly where the first shift begins. Without you noticing. Because what felt rare at the start slowly becomes expected. You stop seeing it as something they're giving and start seeing it as something that just exists, like air in the room. A lot of empaths don't just care more. They often operate from something called a fawn response, a trauma pattern, where being emotionally attuned to others became a way to stay safe. So when they give you that level of presence, it's not just kindness. It's wired deep into how they learn to survive connection. And this is important because the moment something is driven by survival, it also has a limit most people never see coming. Stage 2, you got used to it and stopped seeing it. After a while, something subtle starts to change, not in them, in you. You stop noticing how much they're actually giving, because now it feels normal. Calling them when you're overwhelmed, sending long messages late at night, venting about the same problem over and over again. And they're still there, still listening, still responding, still patient. So your brain makes a quiet assumption. This is just how this relationship works. But here's what most people completely miss in this state. You're still being heard, but they're slowly disappearing. Not physically, but internally. Because while you're expressing everything, they're absorbing everything. And unlike you, they don't always have a place to release it. Think about it like this. You vent and you feel lighter. They listen and they feel heavier. And if that cycle keeps repeating, something starts building inside them. Not anger, not resentment, just quiet exhaustion. And here's where it becomes dangerous because it doesn't look like a problem. There's no argument, no conflict, no moment where they say, this is too much. They just keep showing up. Empaths often don't set boundaries early because their nervous system is wired to prioritize connection over self-protection. So instead of saying, this is too much, they adapt, they stretch, they absorb more. They make space for you, even when there's no space left for themselves. And from the outside, everything still looks fine. They're still kind, still responsive, still there when you need them. But inside, they're starting to feel something they can't quite explain, like they exist in the relationship, but aren't actually seen in it. And when that feeling stays long enough, it doesn't explode. It shifts. Stage 3, you made them feel like they were too much. At some point, the dynamic changes again, but this time, it leaves a mark. It's usually not something big. It's a sentence, a reaction, a moment you don't even remember. Why do you take everything so seriously? You're overthinking again. It's not that deep. And this is where something inside them quietly breaks. Because for you, it's just a comment. But for them, it hits something much older. Something they've heard before. From family, from school, from past relationships. That feeling of being too emotional, too intense, too hard to handle. So now they're stuck in a quiet contradiction. The same empathy that made them show up for you is now being treated like a problem. And this is where things get complicated. Because empathic people don't just feel emotions, they reflect on them. So instead of getting angry, they turn inward. Maybe I am too much. Maybe I should tone it down. Maybe this is my fault. This is where a lot of empaths enter a subtle form of self-gaslighting. They start questioning their own emotional reality to maintain connection, not because they're weak, but because losing connection feels more dangerous than losing themselves. So what do? They adjust. They talk less about how they feel. They filter their reactions. They become easier to be around, but also less real. And from your perspective, it feels like things are improving, less tension, less intensity, more peace. But that peace, it's not connection, it's suppression. And the more they suppress, the further they move away from who they actually are. Stage 4, you started using their empathy without realizing it. At this stage, something even more subtle begins to happen. You start leaning on their empathy. Not just for support, but for stability. They become the person you go to when things fall apart, when you're overwhelmed, when you don't know what to do. And again, they show up. But here's the part that changes everything. You don't just go to them. When you're struggling, you start staying in that state around them, because with them, it works. They calm you down. They understand you. They don't judge you. So without realizing it, you begin to rely on their emotional capacity instead of building your own. And this is where the dynamic quietly shifts into something heavier. Not necessarily toxic, but imbalanced. Because now, they're not just a partner or a friend. They're becoming your emotional regulator. Sometimes it even goes deeper than that. You share vulnerability, but only in one direction. You express pain, but don't hold space for theirs. And in certain moments, you might even lean into being the victim, because you know they won't leave. Empaths can sense when something feels off, but here's the paradox. They also have a strong tendency to override their intuition, to preserve connection. So even when something doesn't feel right, they stay. They explain your behavior. They justify your patterns. They give you the benefit of the doubt again and again, until one day that internal conflict becomes too loud to ignore. The gap between what they feel and what they keep telling themselves gets too wide, and when that happens, they don't argue, they don't accuse, they just start stepping back. A little at first, then more. And most people still don't notice, because on the surface, they're still there. Stage 5. They stop feeling safe with you. This is the stage where everything quietly changes, not on the outside, but inside them. Because at some point, they start needing space. Not because they don't care, but because they've been caring too much for too long. They need silence, distance, time to figure out which emotions are even theirs. And this is where most people make the mistake that ends everything. Instead of understanding it, they question it. Why are you pulling away? You've changed. You're not there for me like before. Or worse, they make them feel guilty for needing that space. And from your perspective, it makes sense. You're used to who they were before. Always available, always present. So this shift feels like rejection. But from their side, it feels like survival. Because for an empath, solitude isn't distance, it's recovery. When an empath doesn't get the space their nervous system needs, they don't become more connected. They shut down emotionally, mentally, even physically. What looks like pulling away is often the early stage of emotional burnout. So when that space is met with pressure or guilt, something clicks. Not loudly, quietly. They stop reaching out, stop explaining, stop trying to fix the connection. And this is the moment most people misunderstand. They think, this is when the relationship started falling apart. But in reality, this is just when it became visible. The invisible goodbye they already left. You just didn't see it before an empath physically leaves. There's a moment almost no one notices, because nothing dramatic happens. No argument, no final conversation, no clear ending. They still reply, still show up sometimes, still sound like themselves. But here's the part that changes everything. They're no longer emotionally there. Something inside them has already closed. Not in anger, not in resentment, just in quiet clarity. They've replayed the moments in their head, the patterns, the imbalance, the feeling of slowly disappearing in a connection that once felt safe, and at some point, they stop trying to fix it. This is what most people never see. They grieve the relationship while still being in it. They go through the guilt. Am I being selfish? Am I expecting too much? Maybe I should just try harder. They give more, stay longer, explain less, until one day, they don't feel anything the same way anymore. This is a form of emotional detachment driven by nervous system protection. When someone has been overwhelmed for too long, their system doesn't keep reacting. It goes quiet. Not because they don't care about you, but because they can't keep feeling at that intensity. And when an empath reaches that point, there's no big goodbye. Just a soft internal decision. I can't do this anymore. After that, everything you see is just the echo. They're polite, calm, distant in a way that's hard to explain. And then they're gone. And what makes it so confusing is this. From your perspective, it feels sudden, but from theirs, they've been leaving for a long time. So if there's one thing to take away from all of this, empaths don't leave because they stop caring. They leave because caring started to cost them too much. It wasn't one big mistake. It was the small things, repeated, unnoticed, unbalanced, getting used to their presence, taking more than giving, making them feel like they were too much, not giving them space when they needed it most. And slowly, the connection that once felt deep starts turning into something heavy, something they have to recover from instead of something that supports them. The part that confuses most people is this. They expect a breaking point, a fight, a final conversation, a clear ending. But with empaths, the ending happens quietly, internally, long before anything changes on the outside. So when they finally walk away, it doesn't come from impulse. It comes from clarity, and that's why they don't come back. Not because they don't miss you, but because they already went through the pain of losing the connection while they were still in it. So now I'm curious. Have you ever had someone like this disappear from your life and you never really understood why? Or maybe you're the one who slowly pulled away and no one ever asked what it cost you to stay that long. If that's you, I want you to drop a comment below, not just yes or no, but what actually happened. Because the truth is, some of the most honest stories don't show up in the video. They show up in the comments. And if this video made something click for you, there's a lot more we need to talk about why empaths stop explaining, why they don't give closure, and why once they're done, they're really done. So if you're trying to understand people like this, or maybe understand yourself a little better, make sure you subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.